Right. So let's kind of dive into this for you. We're exploring one of those really enduring, frankly, unsettling figures from European folklore, the Changeling.
Hmm.
And this wasn't just, a fairy story. It was actually a pretty devastating way societies explained behavior that seemed atypical.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to look at its link to, well, modern ideas about neurodivergence and then how Shakespeare just completely took this dark figure and repurposed it, politically, really, in A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Right.
So our goal here is to help you get a handle on how older societies tried to make sense of behavior outside the norm, this idea of a swapped fairy child.
And how that myth, unfortunately, became this justification for, well, real harm, ableism.
Exactly. This figure, sometimes called an off or an oaf historically, it really embodied society's fear about difference, especially within the home.
And what's really striking when you look across different European traditions is how consistent the description of this fairy imposter child is.
How so?
Well, typically they're described as sickly, failing to thrive physically, maybe crying constantly, just inconsolable.
Okay.
But then sometimes it flips. The child might seem uncannily smart, almost like a tiny adult, or have these weird savant skills like playing music beautifully with no training.
So that kind of duality, either really impaired or strangely gifted, that's interesting. But back then, in, say, the medieval period, without our understanding of neurobiology, how do they even categorize that?
Well, they reached for what they had. Spiritual explanations were huge. It could be seen as, divine punishment, maybe for the parent's sins, or literal demonic influence.
Dark stuff.
Yeah. Or they might use pseudoscience like humoral theory, this old idea that your health and temperament depended on the balance of bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. And imbalance meant problems.
Okay, so without a scientific lens, they explain difference through sin, demons, or dodgy fluid mechanics.
Pretty much. And this lack of understanding is what gave the changeling myth its real power, and frankly, its terrible social function.
Which was?
It allowed people to externalize the issue, to say, this isn't our child, this is something else. A fairy, a demon, not human.
Ah, I see. So by defining the child as non-human.
Exactly. It let the community sort of sidestep their usual moral obligations about caring for kin. It opened the door to justify, well, horrific actions. Torture, neglect, even infanticide, all supposedly to force the fairy to return the real human child.
That's incredibly dark.
It is. And it wasn't just ancient history. You see this logic tragically extending even into the 1890s with the Bridget Cleary case in Ireland. She was an adult woman killed by her husband because he believed she'd been taken by fairies and replaced.
Wow. So this belief had lethal consequences for a long time.
Definitely. And that brings us to a really interesting modern idea. Some scholars look back at these folkloric descriptions, the sickliness, the inconsolability, the strange skills, and suggest this was society's way, however flawed, of trying to understand conditions we might now recognize, things possibly on the autism spectrum or other developmental differences.
So the idea is that neurodivergence isn't new. It's always been here, just interpreted differently.
That's the hypothesis, yeah, that the myth maps onto observable traits.
Okay. But then we get to Shakespeare and A Midsummer Night's Dream. He uses the word changeling, but does something really different, doesn't he?
Totally different. It's a critical shift. The boy they're fighting over, the Indian boy, he's explicitly the stolen human child, not the fairy substitute left behind.
Right. Puck calls him lovely, sweet. There's none of that description of sickness or strangeness or disability that you see in the folklore.
Precisely. Shakespeare keeps the word changeling, which carried all that historical baggage of fear and otherness.
But he applies it to the abducted child, not the imposter.
Yes. And by doing that, he completely detaches the figure from the themes of disability or pathology found in the folklore. The whole argument shifts.
To what then?
Politics. Pure power politics. The boy's origin is specifically mentioned the farthest step of India. He becomes less about domestic anxiety and more like a colonial prize.
A colonial commodity, as some scholars put it. He's the object in this huge marital battle, this power struggle between Oberon and Titania.
Exactly. So Shakespeare uses the fear associated with the changeling idea, the fear of the other, but redirects it away from disability within the home.
And onto bigger external issues, gender politics, marital power, and even sort of early colonial acquisition.
Right. And look at how it ends. Oberon only frees Titania from that humiliating love spell.
Yeah.
After she agrees to give him the boy. It totally reinforces the patriarchal order. He wins, he gets the asset.
So wrapping this deep dive up, what's the takeaway here? It seems like in Shakespeare's play, Difference, the boy, the disruption Titania causes, it sparks chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But restoring order means that difference has to be controlled, subjected, basically assimilated into the dominant power structure.
That's a fair reading, yeah.
So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. Given this long history, from folklore's fear of the other child to Shakespeare's political prize, what does it tell us about our own impulses today? Even with science, how do we still instinctively try to define, manage, and maybe even acquire or control what seems non-normative?